A very warm welcome to all of you. You are watching News9 Mediaverse. I am Kartikeya Sharma and our special coverage on Ayodhya continues. We continue to interview people who have written about Ayodhya, who understand the concept of Hindutva, or those who have participated in the movement, had a contribution, and also those who now want to be part of this dhara, who want to be part of this Indian mainstream, who want to be part of this Ganga. And in this continuation, today I am very happy to inform all of you that I am joined by Hindol Sengupta, a noted author, historian and a journalist who has written on a number of issues from Sardar Patel to the political Hindutva. So let me, today being a different day and tomorrow being momentous, let me greet you differently. Siyawa Ramchandra ki Jai Hindol.
Ramachandra ki jai to you too.
Thank you. So, Pran Pratishtha is a very momentous ceremony. It's loaded with meaning. It says a lot of things. The first question I want to ask you, Hindol, is whenever people would create a narrative on Ayodhya, they would use the word project. So what I want to know from you is Ayodhya a project, or is Ayodhya an assertion of India's mainstream? What is Ayodhya today? What does it stand for?
Thank you, Kartikeya. I'm delighted to join you. Very simply, Ayodhya is a reassertion, a resurgence, as it were, of India's cultural and spiritual mainstream. This is a movement that, in some way or the other, have gone on for 500 years. People often confuse this with the role of the BJP and the RSS, which is very important, but that's very recent. There's a much longer history to the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. And that long history spans across 500 years, perhaps more. So, this entire movement is really a spiritual mainstream reasserting its claim to the fundamentals of culture in this country. Now, this has gone through a legal process. The Supreme Court has given its verdict. One thing that most people are not saying, and I want to emphasize this on your show, this is not a divisive project at all. Please understand, barring that incident of what happened in the 90s, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court has not only allocated a mandir to be built, a temple to be built, but approximately double that amount of land has been given to the Muslim community for a grand mosque to be built. And I saw some images of the kind of mosque that will probably come up. It's really beautiful and grand. So, in a sense, in Ayodhya, this is, at least to me, a project of unification. Please note that the main litigant from the Muslim side today actually is completely on board and is welcoming the building of this mandir. Today he talks about how he wants to welcome the world to his city, which is Ayodhya. So this project has deep cultural moorings. There is politics around it, of course, but there is politics around most things in human life. There is indeed politics, but I think we should look at this moment as a civilizational moment. India's civilizational moment is going through a resurgence through this.
Okay, you know, a lot of people I have interviewed, they're of the opinion that the Ram temple belongs to the country. My question would have been, does it belong to RSS, BJP, VHP, Sampradaya, or Hindu religion? A majority opinion is that it belongs to the nation. Has something shifted in context of the way we perceive our deities and sacred, and instead of being located in a sampradaya, now a temple is being located within the context of nationality, nationalism? Is that a change?
Actually go one step further from you, Kartikeya. As a historian, I actually see this and this temple project as a global project. I was part of this new project where tomorrow we're going to announce this. A junior of mine, a very, eminent and very promising scholar, has just written this great book on how Ramayana is a global text and the story of Lord Ram has a global history. This temple, mark my words today, will become a global destination. And the Ramayana actually has resonances across Asia, across many parts of the world. So I actually see this temple as bringing all those strings together and creating one global hub for the celebration of the story of Prabhu Sri Ram and the Ramayana, which is really in many ways a global text of ethics, morals, and this temple is a celebration of that grand epic. So I actually see it much bigger than India's geographical boundaries. I see this as a global destination.
Indore, when you say it's a global destination, it just the temple is also a reflection of unresolved ideas of nationhood. Whether it's within the Congress or outside the Congress. Imagine in 49, Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister, Govind Vallabh Pant was the Chief Minister, but the statues remain. Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, and the Shilanyas was done, and campaign started from Ayodhya, and the word Ram Rajya was used. And in the third most important chapter, you again had P.V. Narasimha Rao as the Congress Prime Minister. Though there was a different Chief Minister, but when the government was displaced for the next 36 hours, the Japutra continued to be built. So the question I want to come to is it also a reflection that the Congress itself from 40s or 30s onward could not resolve the issue of what the nation should be? So you had people like Nehru on one side, and you had people like Patel and Madan Mohan Malviya, Dr. Rajendra Babu on the other side, who had no qualms even to go to Somnath in 1951 and inaugurated.
You mentioned very valuable and important point, Kartikeya, and thank you for bringing this up. If you look at the history, and my new book on the history of political Hinduism, Soul and Sword, mentions this research and these connections. Look, the Congress used to be a gigantic umbrella party where all kinds of opinions existed under it. But this division into the hard left taking an extremely anti-civilizational position, this happened much later. One of the things I've written papers on, and it's also in my new book, is if you look at the conception of nationhood between two figures we think are polar opposites, deeply antithetical to one another, Savarkar and Nehru. If you read their understanding, their own writings on what they think about what this nation is, their early understanding of the nation, they may have taken politically divergent paths later, but their fundamental conception of what this nation is as a sacred geography is remarkably similar. It is astounding that we don't say this much more. There was a consensus within the Congress, outside the Congress, before independence and afterwards, on what the essence of this nation was. That broke down much later, and of course, Pandit Nehru's reactions, for instance, to Somnath and other things, added to the confusion. But actually, some of those reactions were also directly, created by what happened at partition. 1 million people slaughtered, right? So there were some dramatic reactions right after that. But still, there was a consensus that this is a sacred geography, this is an old civilization. All these newfangled hard left ideas that there was no India before 1947, there is no such thing as Hinduism. All this is said by the hard left today. All these ideas were never part of our consensus. We had a cultural consensus within the Congress and outside about India being an old grand civilization which has its own place in the world and being a sacred geography. It is only much later when the hard left gets into action, this consensus is broken, and all of these strange ideas that there is no such thing as India about Bharat before 1947, there is no such thing as Hinduism, all of these ideas came much later. But even within the Congress and outside, there was a consensus.
Is it correct for me to say, Hindol, that You very rightly pointed out, I made, today when I was going through your book, there's something which I noted. Nehru an atheist, Savarkar an atheist, but both of them stuck with the word you used, glorious homeland. But, it also made me rethink. So ultimately, Nehru was an outsider to this cultural consensus.
I actually argue that even Nehru, who had a fairly deep westernized secular point of view, quote unquote, even he understood fundamentally that this was a sacred geography. Even he understood that the essence of this land is spirituality. Even he understood that this cultural civilization is important, right? He may have differed with Savarkar and others on how to implement these things. That's a different thing. But conceptually, even he agreed. The problem is that much later, like I said, with the time when a whole bunch of education ministers from the hard left and got into action, the JNU tribe got into action in a sense that they created an entirely different idea of India, which they tried to push very hard. And that's one of the reasons, actually, I always say this is the reason why the hard left hates Gandhi. Because if you can bring down Gandhi, in their minds, it's like bringing down Hinduism and bringing down Indian civilization. So this happened later, but the Congress always, even the Congress, had a clear conception, a clear consensus that India was a sacred geography and Indian civilization mattered. Sadly, we are very far away from that position with some people today, but this was always true historically.
But you also argue in your book, then I'll come back to another question, that the position of those who continue to harp on Hindu Muslim unity also hardened. And you have given a reference of Sardar Patel. And you also wrote, and I have a line which I've taken from your book, irrational need to bring Hindu Muslims together. So do you think after 19 or the direct day or maybe after 1940s, there was a hardening of a stand within the Congress party and that change was momentous?
See, after the Calcutta killings, right? The horrible, tragic Calcutta killings, there was a hardening of stances, definitely. We must understand that in our freedom movement, there was a lot of effort by Gandhi ji, by Pandit Nehru, by Sardar Patel, and others to prevent the partition of India and to get Jinnah on board into this project of the modern Republic of India. But once the bloodletting started, and the Mopla riots, I mentioned in my book the reactions to the Mopla riots. I mentioned in my book what happens after the direct killing, the direct action day killings in Calcutta. There is an understanding that even Nehru and Patel built a hardening of stance that we can't deal with Jinnah anymore. This, sadly, much that we tried to keep this together, this kind of bloodletting means that our project to unite will not work and we cannot keep this country together. But they were equally determined that we will not exactly mirror Pakistan. So therefore, with Ambedkar and others, this entire project to retain a plural country and so on and so forth, right? But certainly, once that kind of tragic bloodletting happened, there was a hardening of stance. You're absolutely right.
And it's not only about hardening of the stand. A lot of people confine the movement to build Ram temple limited to VHP and RSS. Yes, they were the most successful part of the number of andolans. I'm saying in plural, andolans, which had been taken out by various sects, groups, and organizations. But there have been a number of them even before we got our independence. But I think the important part here is when we talk about those andolans, when you start your book, you have mentioned Aurobindo, Vivekananda, Bankim Chand Chatterjee, Shivaji. Savarkar comes little late. After I have read 25% of your book. People's idea of Hindutva starts with Savarkar and ends with his fight
No,
with Nehru.
that's wrong.
That's wrong.
Yes,
Uh,
that's wrong.
so when we
That's
talk about,
completely wrong.
yes, absolutely. So I want to relate that part of your book with what's happening in Ayodhya tomorrow.
Yes. See,
I,
I want
I
to mention Kartikeya on your show, and this is the
yes,
thing to understand, right? This is how important this project is. People think Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay Chattopadhyay's Anandamath only gave us Vande Mataram. But Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Anandamath also gave us for the first time the word Hindutva. So the national movement and the connection of this word goes very deep. RSS, Hindu Mahasabha, Savarkar come much later. Much later. So we have to look at people like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Chandranath Basu, and a whole bunch of others who are mentioned in the book. You know, during the age of fire, the Agni Yug, the revolutionary period of Bengal history, and others, you know, like Tilak and others in other parts of India who were talking about these issues. Savarkar comes later. So, therefore, I think it is important to contextualize this properly. That while many people think that this entire movement really began with Advani's Rath Yatra, that's not true. That's really not true. It has a much older, deeper history. And in my book, I mention that look, all the dramatist personae, the important characters to this political Hinduism movement, were mentioned by many of the people we revere. You know, Chhatrapati Shivaji is one of the key characters. Well, Chhatrapati Shivaji is being mentioned by Vivekananda, he's being mentioned by Tagore. So, you know, there is, again, you see that far from being a fringe movement, which is how this was always described, that political Hinduism is a fringe movement. Far from being a fringe movement, actually, it was at the very heart of our national movement, especially before Gandhiji, you know, appeared on the scene, but in many ways, even after Gandhiji came.
Okay, but Hindol, you know, in your Soul and Sword, you also mentioned a word called bal, strength, you know, which
Yes.
became part of political Hindutva. Did we see the impression of that concept of bal or masculinity in the Ayodhya movement?
What happened on that day, if that's what you're referring to,
Not that
what
day,
happened
not
on
that
that
day.
day?
Overall, because bal is also about individual character, and bal is strength is also about a national character. When you get a lot of individuals to come, you talk about collective, it becomes plural. So that is why I'm not using the English word strength, which you have mentioned in the book. I'm using the word bal and I'm using the word masculinity.
So you absolutely right. And you know, the moment you mentioned that, we have to go straight back to Vivekananda. You know, what did Vivekananda say? Vivekananda said that in a sense, this nation had to return to spirituality, but also return to a certain physical vigor. You know, that's why Vivekananda famously said that in some ways, playing football might be as important, if not more important, for some people than praying to God, right? That was his sort of interesting way of saying that physical vigor was very important, because you know what had happened to India after 1,000 years of, you know, invasions, colonialism, all kinds of things. The spirit, the sort of vigor and the spirit of a people got really sapped. And, you know, we had become a broken people, something that even Naipaul noticed. You know, we had become a wounded and broken people. That had to be reinvigorated in some senses. And I think one of the ways it got reinvigorated, of course, was through the Ram Janmabhoomi movement.
Can we say that Prime Minister, you have written a chapter, but this is my question on Prime Minister Modi, that Modi's prime ministership has ended the Nehruvian discourse of governance, especially in the context of prime ministership, because every prime minister after Nehru, even Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they had this in the back of their mind, which is private should never be merged with public. But I think with Prime Minister Modi, the private values are in display in public, whether these are temple trips, whether it's a silence for 24 hours at Kedarnath, whether it's Yam Niyam rules, whether it's his vegetarianism, or display of his intellectual, emotional affection towards political Hindutva, you know, of he is the biggest votary. He represents it.
I think we are firmly, and perhaps this theme is embedded in your question, Kartikeya. We are now in the Second Republic, very clearly. You know, modern nation states are, you know, if they can be broken into phases and stages, the coming of the Ram temple is firmly putting us in the second phase, the second republic. From independence onwards to this point, in a sense, was the first republic of India. But with the coming of Prime Minister Modi, already we were moving towards the Second Republic. We are now going to be firmly in the Second Republic. And the Second Republic will always be really about the invigoration of India's cultural norms, India's cultural heritage. It will firmly be India making a huge pitch for great power status, if we bring in international relations theory into this, great power status, and projecting inwards and outside about wow, what makes India unique. Remember, when America was a rising power and aspired to great power status, it projected around the world that it was a city upon the hill, right? It was the land of the free and the home of the brave. It lifted its lamp like the Statue of Liberty for all oppressed people to come here and come there and find freedom. India today is projecting inwards and externally that it's a great civilization, it's a civilization that's inclusive and plural, but very, very deeply connected to its ethos, its spirituality, and that's what it has to offer to the world. And Prime Minister Modi, in that sense, represents that great break. He basically is, in that sense, look, in America, no one has ever become president without saying that they're Christian, right?
Correct,
And
correct.
we are not following America's path at all. But Prime Minister Modi clearly is saying that we do not need to be apologetic in any way about India's spiritual core, which is Hindu spirituality.
Absolutely. I mean, to say public display of spirituality was such a difficult thing. I'm an 80s child born in 75, and I have from Sardar Patel to St. Stephen's D School. I remember it's a long journey that as a first child of a person who had migrated from a city to Agra, my father, we would have Havan and Kheer at home, and places where I went to study, I have no issues, they would cut a cake. So, I would always tell my mother that can you give me money so that I can take them to Nirula's, because, we will not have all the fun, and, they'll all be smeared with the tilak, after some time, if I have to go out, I'll have to take it out, So, I think India, through millions of us, has completed that journey of, can I say, of being at ease with your cultural moorings?
Absolutely. And, I have the same journey in yours, Kartikeya. Yeah, I, of course, was born in a place called Jamshedpur. Today it's in Jharkhand. I grew up in Calcutta. We were very deeply devout at home, but I grew up in a communist state. The religiosity was always something you kept to a degree, private. You didn't talk about it and so on and so forth. Today, I think we are far more confident and far more empowered. I'll give you a little story, an anecdote which I've never shared before, but I'll tell you, Kartikeya. Recently, I was doing a book tour of an earlier book of mine, Sing, Dance and Pray, on the life of Srila Prabhupada, and I was at the residence of Anil Agarwal, who owns Vedanta, who was hosting this, dinner, and he was hosting a kirtan event and a book launch at his house in London. And Anil Agarwal said that for most of my time, in London, I actually never spoke about my personal faith at all. And today I sing the kirtan everywhere. So when I heard him say that, I realized that, not just his generation, but even people of our generation, we have similar stories to share. Today, I think we are far more liberated to be who we are and, to be unabashedly proud of our civilization, proud of our spirituality, and embrace it holistically. That doesn't mean everybody has to embrace it quite in the same way, not at all. We have countless subsects, countless paths, but at least to very confidently embrace it and not be shy or apologetic about it.
Thank you, Hindol. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow is a very important day. When I was asked a day before yesterday, though I didn't use the word Second Republic, but I have to say that, I said it's as important as, when we got independence, not in terms of the scope, but in terms of significance. There are two different words. In significance,
Okay.
because what happens that day changes a lot of things. And I think you have really summed up very well by using the word Second Republic, that there is, when history has continuity, tomorrow will mark a break discontinuity. And discontinuity is not a negative. It's also a starting point of something new. Thank you so much, Hindol. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure reading your book, The Sword and the Soul. Thank you so much.
Thank
Now
you.
we
Thank
slip
you
into
very
a
much,
short break.
Kartikeya.
And on the other hand, we will bring you an exclusive interview with the religious leader Devaki Nandanji.